morning, friends. Today we are going to start up with another perspective. I think we all have talked about the issue of development of sociology in India, and in that context we try to see that there are various ways in which we can see the Indian social phenomenon, especially when we try to speak about the various aspects. We try to see that there are different perspectives which are meant for understanding the Indian society, and in that framework we try to find that there are certain new perspectives which are coming up, which are giving a new direction to the understanding of Indian society. And in that context, here we can locate another prominent perspective, which of course has its visibility, not very old, but it is going to be very contemporary and relevant when we try to speak about the functioning and the existence of society in India. And here of course I am speaking about the issue of environmental perspective. I think when we try to speak about this issue of environmental perspective, many things comes in our mind, that why we want to study that, how we can see it sociologically in that sense, and apart from that, what is the relevance of this perspective. So this lecture is basically dealing with the basic issues pertaining to the environmental aspect. Especially we try to speak about the meaning and genesis of environmental issues. I think that is the area of concern for many. Then second thing in that sense which we can see is basically tracking the so-called environmental perspective. So we have to see a sort of a trajectory of the environmental perspective, which will basically speak about the historical way in which the perspective has emerged as a sharp discipline, and also it speaks about the various conditioning which has led to the emergence of this perspective. And then I think since we try to make it more sociological or discipline specific, so in that context we will be basically speaking about the contribution of the significant scholar who has made understanding of environmental perspective in a particular framework. And for that we have a celebrated name, that is Ramchandra Guha. He is a prominent Gandhian critic scholar, and he has been celebrated. I think you might have heard about him. He is writing into various weeklies and also into the various newspapers as a columnist. So in that way I think Ramchandra Guha's understanding about the contemporary issues is very vibrant. And also somewhere we will also try to locate the various environmental movement which have been the part of Indian society. I think this all makes up this package of the environmental perspective. But before that, I think when we try to speak about the environment is not seen as an entity which is in isolation. Rather we try to see that the environment has to be seen in relation to the masses, in relation to the people, and for that we have a specific term, that is the ecology. Now ecology, when we try to see, it is basically seen as the relationship between the man and nature. So what ecology means to us is the interaction, the interrelationship which is there between the man and nature in the various historical phases, and especially if we try to see in terms of its origin. So the word ecology has been given by or coined by the German natural philosopher, that is Ernst Haeckel. Ernst Haeckel has talked about this specific term of ecology, and that which he is trying to speak about in way back 1886, when he has coined the term ecology, which basically speaks about the scientific study of the relationship between the organism and also the surroundings, that is the environment. So, in that way I think when we try to see with regard to the origin and the existence, we try to find out that there is a specific concern about how we have to or what motivate us to study the environment, because ecology definitely plays a crucial understanding of the relationship between the man and the nature. But somehow we also try to be, or we are more worried about that why this particular issue came into existence, or why suddenly the issue of environment has become so lively. So, one thing that comes up in our mind of course is that it has come into the prominence because of the project of modernity. And when we try to see that the project of modernity, it tries to see the age of enlightenment, which speaks about the liberation of man. And this liberation of man has to be seen in terms of how the individual has been seen as, the man has been seen as an individual. And it was a period which also saw certain amount of disenchantment with the lively world. And we also try to see that there was the phase where we have the advent of the scientific temper. So, I think this all notion of scientific temper, the whole notion of development with regard to the modernity, all these things has led to certain amount of intermixing or the sort of relationship between the man and the ecology. And in that way we try to see that the man tries to treat nature with his own rationality, because everybody have their own rationale about how we can deal with the nature. And in that way we try to see that the rationalization which has no limits, the rationalization which can be seen in terms of the myths, the rituals, it can be seen in terms of the bureaucracy, it can be seen in terms of the capitalism in that sense as such, or it can be seen in terms of the path of development. In either way we try to see, we try to find out that there is certain amount of logic which was involved, which has basically been concerned or which has basically emerged with regard to this project of modernity. And such an approach method or such an approach has basically led to the human being for thinking and acting. And here lies the imagination about the environment, the environmental perspective, because everything has to be seen in terms of coherence, everything has to be seen in terms of systematic planning, efficiency, calculations are involved in that sense as such. So, all these things were required to be part of rationality, and how man has to deal with the rationality in the different phases of time, because the rationality of capitalism would be very different from the rationality of the so called bureaucracy or the rationality of the science. So, in that way we have the different ways of interpretation of the rationality, which has given rise to the different ways of looking to the nature. And at this juncture we try to see that there is an emergence of the new discipline like ecology, which basically has shifted our attention towards the new form of conceptualization, especially when we try to see that who is responsible for that and what has made the ecology so prominent. And for that I think we try to have a very famous environmentalism issue, the writing by Rachel Carson's and his prominent work, which of course is known for the emergence of the whole debate of environmental issues, that is the silent spring. Now, this issue of silent spring, which was published in 1962, is a remarkable contribution which has led to the understanding of the environment in a new way. I think the title itself speaks about that spring is always full of what you can say joys, it is full of the playful activities, it is full of the confidence and lots of music. But the title itself is saying it is a silent spring, which basically means that the spring, which is part of the nature, is not happy, or sometimes we can say that the silence is seen in terms of that it has not come out with the full joyfulness, and that is how we try to see that certain problems are there. And these problems are to be understood in terms of what one can say, trying to relook into the nature, trying to understand the relationship between the man and the nature, and in that way we can have the real understanding of the various seasons. So I think the work itself is speaking about the Silent Spring is by Carson, which of course is a remarkable contribution in the field of environmental issues. Now I think when we try to see that how or where it has come into prominence, the environmental issues, if you try to see, if you try to have the environmental history, we try to see that it constituted basically in the United States. And as we know that United States has reached to level of development at certain period of time, and in the 1960s we try to see that the climatic influence has started affecting certain amount of history, political activism, the young historians which are trying to see the things in a new way, especially if you try to see certain names. We have Roderick Nash looking to the new waves of political activism, and they are basically trying to see that how a specific class is going to oppose what you can say, or not only oppose but also trying to raise the voice, and that is when we try to see that earth is being seen as a biotype, and this biotope earth, the earth as a biotope is basically trying to speak about the fact that it is going to bring about the new level of debate. And here we try to see that the environmental history has come into prominence, especially we have the significant contribution which was visible in August 1972. And August 1972 we saw a special number of Pacific Historical Review. Pacific Historical Review, and this Pacific Historical Review was basically a famous article by Roderick Nash, and which has made a appeal for the special amount of political activism on the issues of environment, and that is how we try to see the debates on the environmental issue has come into prominence. Like I said that we have Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, that was in 1962, but apart from that we also have a very significant attempt which has been made, especially in April 22. We have in 1970s the very prominent contribution, or we try to see it as a special day, that we have the First Earth Day, and this First Earth Day itself speaks about that we are concerned about our planet, we are concerned about our understanding about the nature, and here we try to see that on this particular day, on the 1st of April 22nd, we try to see that around 20 million people in the United States, they came together and they had a large demonstration over the issues of development which are going to be drastic and detrimental to the human race. And later on we try to find out that the American Society, we try to find out that the American Society for the Environmental History was framed. American Society for Environmental History was framed in 1977, keeping in view these demonstrations and in order to address and tackle up the issues of environment. So this particular society was basically working for or concerned about the environment. Now it is also seen as a sort of a turning point in the global framework, because it was not an area of concern for America alone. Rather we try to see that it was a turning point for having the new understanding about the ecology, the new way of looking to the ecology, especially when we try to see, we try to find out that somewhere it also tries to hint that, or it's an alarm for that something which is unintended for the wildlife, for the plantations, for the human health, all these things are going to come up. And as we all know that we had the two world wars, and these two world wars, the first and the second, it speaks about the catastrophic effect on the human population, on the environment, on the plantation, and also on the natural resources in general, because both these world wars, if you try to see, they were at the cost of destroying the nature. Human race is fine, but it also has affected drastically the nature, which could have been a source of survival for the future generation, and that is what make the people concerned about the way to contest politically, legally, and also in terms of popular culture to save the earth, to save the environment. And in that way we try to see that in the last 50 years there has been series of environmental disasters which happened throughout the history of the world, and they basically try to have the non-human nature as the issue of concern. Now the point of course is that when we try to see these issues, I think one important work which we can refer to is the work by Jamieson, and Jamieson was trying to see the issues in terms of reinventing nature. Now this issue of reinventing nature, which was basically seen as those issues which are going to be challenges to the humanity, basically the non-human spheres of existence are to be redefined, or we try to see that the need for protecting the nature, for transforming the society, all these things were part of this whole debate which Jamieson has read with regard to this issue of reinventing nature. Basically we try to see that we have the new way of looking to the anthropocentric issues, anthropocentric concern, where the human being is at the center, and also we try to have that how environment can be seen as an important issue, like we try to become anthropocentric to ecocentric. Now this is a gradual shift. If you try to see, the man-centric issue is now going to be ecocentric issue, because if we can preserve the environment, then definitely we can sustain many societies. So in that way we try to see that the human societies which are to be seen as transforming, they are to be seen in terms of ecocentric understanding. So it's a gradual shift which we can see in terms of a debate, especially we try to see that this is to be seen as an epistemological break, because a shift from man to the environment to the eco was a significant issue. And we try to see that by 1970s lot many debates have been raised which basically were trying to see the environment, environmental problems, pollution, also certain other issues of what you can say the extinct races, the depletion of the natural resources. These things were going to be part of the global canvas. So by 1970s the new form of global canvas was emerging, which tries to debate upon these issues which were pertaining to the environment. Now we try to see that there is also an amount of the radical green thinking. Now this radical green thinking basically tries to see that how we can have the new way of protecting the trees, the green plantations in that sense as such, and it was basically many organizations, the organizations which were not in the mainstreams, they were being put together, they were being organized so that they can raise these issues, and we have a proper disciplining of the environment, which is I think we all know that we have the environmental sciences which tries to see the so-called environment, community, ecology, climatology, oceanography, and many other issues which are part of the environmental problems. But the point is that these tremendous initiatives which have been taken in the 1950s to 70s, they were trying to make a gradual shift in the ecological model. The first phase, if you try to see, the first phase was basically trying to see the traditional mode of understanding the natural preservation. So the first phase was basically trying to have the new way of the natural conservation and preservation. That was an important concern. Basically we try to see that new kind of environmental consciousness has come into picture, and also we try to see that the new institutional formation like the World Wildlife Fund, and we have many other issues which become prominent with regard to the environmental consciousness. So, this is the first wave which we try to see, and there we also try to see that the science which was being reoriented, we have the radical technologies which are trying to preserve and conserve the nature in that sense as such. Parallelly, we have certain other issues where the small is beautiful. The basic idea in that sense of course is that the small is beautiful by Schumacher is not something which is significant, but every entity is going to be important as such. So, that small is beautiful does not mean that we are trying to ignore the big issues, but the more important issue in that sense of course is that the smallness or the small entity also can play a significant role when we try to see with regard to the understanding of the existence of the society. Then I think another growing concern was the issue of energy, the energy issues. Now, energy issues I think is always a matter of concern because it was seen as a important issue, the priority agenda for the political parties, or even we try to see the nationalistic ideology, where we have the national political parties whose concern was to have a control over the energy in that sense as such, and these energies are to be seen in various ways which are to be derived from the natural resources. Like we try to see that in many parts of the Europe, we have the new research centers, we have the government departments, and also we have the new organizations whose basic concern was to have a kind of service culture among the students and the faculties. Then we also have the fourth phase. The fourth phase basically which is seen in terms of the movement, and the movement which is basically seen as a sort of an organization, the organizational learning in that sense as such, and basically the role of youth. So, the youth mobilization was also an important concern which was been visible by the end of this environmental issues in the last phase, and here we try to see that there is certain amount of crystallization of the institutional interest. We have not only the government or the organizations which are responsible or which are concerned for the protection of the environment, rather we have the role of the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, the civil societies, and also we have the parallel parties, the parallel partners which also try to see the preservation of the environment. So, I think all these things basically try to see that whatever the transformations which took place with regard to the environmental issues, and finally the era in which we are putting up is the era of globalization, and that is basically the part of understanding how the era of globalization is going to be significant with regard to this issue of environment. Now, here there is one important issue that come into prominence, that is we had the regrouping of the nations. We have the what you can say countries which are coming together on a common front for a common issues, like we all have certain issues which are quite prominent, like the climate change. The climate change was one of the important issue which has been area of concern in the field of globalization, because we try to see that this climatic changes definitely is a growing concern and pertaining to how we can have the new waves, the new way to bring back to the old climatic conditions. Then another significant issue of which we all are aware is the ozone depletion, and that is again a area of concern for everybody. Then also we have the so called preservation of the biodiversity, that is another important issue in that sense as such, which are going to have an impact on the human society. So, all the three issues, climatic change, ozone depletion, and also the biodiversity, all these things were quite what you can say appealing to most of the masses. Now, we have the government, we have the business workers, we have certain other parties in that sense as such, and all of them were trying to work together. So virtually we try to see that the environmental issues which are to be seen as the localized entities, now there is the internationalization of the environmental issues. And this internationalization of the environmental discourse, basically it involves the foreign funding transfers, the foreign aids in that sense as such, the technology transfers, and many other things as such. Like sometimes in India we try to see that the new biodegradable mechanisms are there, like in railways I think the bio toilets are coming up as such. Now this is basically how we are trying to borrow the new technologies from the other countries. Similarly, we have the biodegradable products in that sense as such. We have the ways of not only putting the things into garbage, but more important in that sense of course is that how they are to be destroyed also, so that they could not have the sustaining effect in the future generation. So virtually this internationalization of the environmental issues had made us everybody alarmed and sensitive about this particular issue, and in that way we try to see that this has basically led to a great epistemological transfer, or we try to see that the new wave of or the new consciousness has started emerging with regard to the environmental issues. Now we also have with this the aspect of ecological modernization theory, which is basically by Arthur P.J. Moll, and this is basically a theory of modernization that came in 1996, and the main concern was, or the argument was, that valuable beginning point for analyzing the contemporary reflexive reorganizations and transformation of the production into the ecological criteria. So the ecological modernization theory was trying to make what? It tries to make the contemporary reflexive reorganization and transformation of the production. And what was the center? The center was the ecological criteria. So one can interpret this reflective reorganization of the industrial society and attempt to conquer the ecological crisis. So virtually we try to see that although the capitalism, the industrial society is meant for production, but on the same side it is also trying to preserve the environment. So that is how we try to see. So it is not the profit interest of the organization of the industrial society, but their interest also has to be to have or to overcome the ecological crisis, and that is how we try to see this ecological modernization theory. And this ecological reforms, which has been because of the modern science and the technology, it was trying to replace the new technologies which are going to be more eco-friendly or meant for the ecological conservation. Now we also have the so called economizing ecology. Now this is again important, economizing ecology, which is basically having certain amount of economics and the market dynamics in the ecological reforms. We are talking about not only saving, or we are trying to have the calculations with regard to the production, rather we are trying to have the issues which are pertaining to the ecology. That is, economizing ecology of course is that at the lesser cost of of the ecology, or effect on the human population and the natural resources, we can have the production. So virtually the economizing ecology has an appeal for the sustainability. It is not that all the products are to be manufactured and utilized in one go, rather it should have a parameter of sustainability, and that is how we can have the issue of the ecological rationality, which has been the part of the debate which is meant for economizing the ecology. Thank you.